It was almost a year ago now that I climbed to the top of this tree and vowed to stay here until the forest is protected. A couple of days ago we had an announcement about the forest agreement, and there was a lot of people that contacted me and said, well, does this mean you're getting down? Sadly, the forests are not protected. They're still under threat, and as long as they're under threat, I'm 100% committed to staying up here until they are protected. And so I decided to make this video blog to unpack a little bit of the detail about the deal and the reasons why grassroots activists are concerned about this deal and the reason why I'm staying in the tree. Firstly, I think it's way too soon to jump out and say, yay, we've won, let's pack up and go home. And you know, it's sad that there's so many people out there now that think that we've protected over 500,000 hectares. That forest has not been protected. In fact, the whole agreement has not even been implemented or agreed to be implemented because it has to still pass through the Legislative Council. But even when it gets passed, if it does, there's still a whole range of clauses and loopholes and hoops that need to be jumped through before the protection order for forests will even be implemented. And one thing is sure, when you look at the agreement, it is very vague, there's very ambiguous language, and there's no clear timeframes when it comes to the conservation outcomes. So we actually have no idea how long it's going to take for them to implement that. In the meantime, though, one thing is sure is there will be logging inside the area that is earmarked for protection, and that's explicitly stated in the agreement. And you know, they say that they will be rescheduling out of those areas. Now, if that's anything like the rescheduling that was done for the moratorium, announced in fact 2 years ago in the Statement of Principles, then I think that we have little confidence that the forest will actually, you know, cessation of logging will happen in the forest. Last year we had a conservation agreement announced, and the same thing. This area should have been protected. It isn't. It still remains under threat, and therefore I'm still in the tree. So, you know, I hope that it's not going to be another case of 2 years goes by and that rescheduling hasn't happened, because a lot of forest has been lost in the meantime when that moratorium was due, and it would be a shame for these forests to be lost before they get a chance to be protected over the coming months. In addition to the long and undefined timeframes, I think it is really important to unpack the reality of the figure to be protected. To claim that 500,000 hectares has been protected is simply misleading. The fact is that only 395,000 hectares is the amount that will be protected as the first stage. The second stage, the rest of those hectares are due to come in a few years, but they are due to only be passed if it passes through a successful durability report. And you know, I think that we can safely say that there's a very slim chance that those forests will ever be protected. Not only does the durability report require that the public, and that's, you know, the people who have not had a say in this agreement, it requires them to actually proactively support the entire agreement. So it's basically saying that if anybody in Tasmania speaks up about this agreement, if anybody says that there are problems with the agreement, then they're simply going to say that those forests will not be protected. Though I doubt they will peel back and repeal the what they've put in place in terms of the industry. So what we're going to see is that, you know, the forests on one hand, that remains uncertain. The certainty, however, is in what the industry is going to get out of this agreement. So I think it's very important not to delude ourselves and think that we've already won. Now, not to say that we can never get those hectares protected, but it's important to understand that you know, the fight isn't over, and we still need to work towards protecting those forests. So in addition to that, even within the 395,000 hectares, there is areas that will not be protected. There are areas that will be logged in the meantime over the coming months. There are areas that are identified as once-off logging or log of last resort. This basically means they'll be allowed to be logged. I can't see how that can be defined as being protected. It says even after they're logged once, there is still no guarantee that after that they'll be protected, because it's subject to wood supply. And as we've seen before, you know, when things have been subject to wood supply, it's an opportunity for the industry to say, oh no, we want to log that. They shouldn't be subject to those kind of conditions because they have actually been verified by independent scientists to be of World Heritage and National Heritage value, and the government has a responsibility to act on those recommendations and to protect those forests. And so that's to clarify a few issues around timeframes and around hectares. On top of that, there is a range of other issues, and it's quite concerning to look through the deal in detail and to see that, in fact, the real problem here is the locking in of logging in native forests. The whole purpose of this process was to create an outcome that would benefit the environment and communities. And this original statement of principles was really based on looking at a transition away from native forest logging. Instead of moving us forward to that option, this agreement is taking Tasmania backwards. It's taking us back to an industry that has already failed, and that's the wood chipping industry. It explicitly states that you know, the signatories are going to try and find or conjure up new markets for wood chips, and it's just unfathomable why when we have this opportunity to progress to a different type of industry, a sustainable industry, we would make the option of going back to a model that has already failed. I mean, wood chipping has dragged Tasmania through the mud, both environmentally and economically, and failed. Guns have collapsed. The wood chip market is collapsing. There is no reason to be doing a large-scale destruction, clear felling, cable logging of these forests in order to create wood chips. They're looking at issues, and these is what's been on the table for a long time and what's been talked about by the industry. Biomass, which basically means the burning of these forests to create electricity, and a pulp mill. We all know the industry has been pushing and pushing for a pulp mill, and this agreement rules out neither biomass or a pulp mill. And it's very concerning to think that in exchange for protecting some areas of forest, that the rest of Tasmania will be exposed to this kind of large-scale industry. What it is going to do is intensify logging in areas that are outside of the protected reserves. This will include areas that have actually been identified as World Heritage and National Heritage value. This will include native forests that are important habitat for wildlife species, for carbon storage sinks, and for water catchments for local communities. A whole range of reasons why we need to manage Tasmania's native forests better. And what the reality will be of such an intensification of logging is a weakening of the already weak Forest Practices Code. The Forest Practices Authority have in fact made recommendations for a biodiversity upgrade of that code, and they have not been put in place. This agreement does not provide the opportunity for that upgrade to happen. It is putting too much logging pressure onto those areas outside of the reserve. Now, one real issue is the high quality saw logs. There was a whole process that was put in place because the signatories identified this as an important option to move forward, and that was a voluntary buyback from sawmillers. So sawmillers who did not want to be in the industry anymore had the option to sell back to the government their quota of saw logs, and this would be an opportunity to contract the industry and to therefore protect further areas of forests that were on the table for protection. The result was that quite a number of sawmillers have indicated that they want to take that option up, that they want to sell back their quota. Now, instead of retiring that quota, meaning that that amount of forest will not need to be logged and providing that opportunity for conservation, the industry have said they want to redistribute that quota. Basically, that looks like it could have the impact that small sawmillers will be shut down through this process, and that quota will be redistributed to bolster up and strengthen the remaining sawmillers. And it is completely unacceptable to redistribute that quota. Its purpose was to create less pressure, logging pressure on our native forests, and to redistribute it will only increase that pressure. Now, in addition, we have the question of certification. It has been the aim of the agreement process to look at certification options, and the real problem is that the ambiguous language of the agreement does not rule out Australian Forestry Standard certification. Now, this certification, as part of PEFC, is completely unacceptable. PEFC has been absolutely condemned by environmental groups on an international scale. It does not, it cannot be seen as a legitimate certification. It is sided towards the industry, and it allows for the destruction of forests, and then for those timber products to be labelled with this certification. It's an absolute sham. It's a joke. In addition, the agreement says that they want to have Forest Stewardship Council, FSC, certification for those areas of remaining native forest. Now, this is an indication that they intend to continue logging those forests, and to say that they are going to continue industrial scale logging, clear felling, cable logging, and all of the practices that they currently do, and not strengthen the Forest Practices Code. It's impossible to see how they think that they can get Forest Stewardship Council certification for those practices, and they should not be able to get that. The industry needs to be making a transition, not locking in logging of native forests. And so it's all those factors combined that are causing concern for grassroots environment groups in Tasmania about the future of our forests. And of course we want to see those areas protected, and we would love to see reserves created. But the question is, at what cost are we going to pay, and at what cost is Tasmania's environment going to pay for the creation of those new reserves? And if it is the complete obliteration and intensification of logging in native forests, and the locking in of the industry, propping up the industry, propping up old school methods of logging, and a return to wood chipping, that is a high price to pay. In addition, it's also attempting to lock in a silencing mechanism, a way to say that nobody in Tasmania can speak up and say anything about the forest industry, that we should all be happy with those reserves and go away and be quiet. I think that this is really problematic. We want to have a democracy where people can have a say, where people can be critical of those things that are causing destruction to our environment, and have an opportunity to improve the industry. And I think that while getting reserves is a very important first step, it cannot be seen as the final and only step towards conservation, because there's a whole range of other issues that clearly need to be addressed. And so I hope that you will join me in speaking up on behalf of these forests, on saying that yes, we can do better. We can create a future for Tasmania that protects the forest and makes a transition for the industry out of industrial scale destruction in native forests.